India-UK set to begin the next round of negotiations on the trade deal soon. Both countries have set an internal deadline to control negotiations by March 2023. But there are definitely some hurdles as far as these trade deals go. And UK has made it very clear that they will not compromise on their needs, on their core interests, just because they have to meet any particular deadline. Let me go across to Prabhash Ranjan, an expert on bilateral treaties, also a professor of law at Jindal Global Law School. Professor Ranjan, thank you very much for joining us. Let me begin with issues on tariff rates on key products like automobiles. This is a very core issue for the Indian industry. How do you think negotiations will play out on this front?
Yeah, thank you, Parikshit, for having me on the show. Tariff rates is indeed a very, very important issue, and especially for automobiles, because UK is quite keen to push for a tariff reduction in the automobile sector. Now, one of the challenges that we face is that because of the Make in India campaign, the tariff rates in India across the board have been increasing in the last 3 to 4 years. And because of the increase in these tariff rates, it makes the negotiations difficult. Now, if we take the automobile sector, the tariff rates on cars is in the range of 60% to 100%. Now, this obviously is not something which would be acceptable to the UK, which would like a drastic reduction in the automobile sector on the tariff rates. Automobiles has actually been a success story in India, and therefore, for the automobile sector to resist against any such reduction perhaps sends out a negative signal about how ready the Indian industry is to compete with the imports coming from the UK. So I think that on this stand, unless or until India agrees and reduces the tariff rate, this will be a difficult issue between the two sides.
Right, definitely. This was a problem area during the last EU-India FTA negotiations as well. Also, the point on IPR issues, especially evergreening of patents. There have been reports that this could be a problem, a setback in future for the Indian pharmaceutical industry. Give us a sense of what kind of IPR controls or measures does UK want to put in the trade deal, which may or may not benefit India?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The IP issue is also a very important one. I mean, recently, as you would know, there was a leaked text of the IP chapter, which actually created a lot of ripples. In the leaked IP chapter, the proposition was that UK is pushing for evergreening of patents, which basically means to extend the patent protection beyond the normal 20 years. Plus, they also want India to change their laws and give up on the pre-grant opposition of patents. It has been clarified subsequently that this is merely a negotiating text, and India is going to resist to these changes. But it's a well-known fact that the developed world has always put pressure on countries like India to adopt a higher IP standard. And therefore, I'm not surprised to see that this is part of the negotiations. India needs to be very, very clear on this, and India should ensure that it does not accept any IP provision in the FTA which is TRIPS plus in its nature. So the Indian patent laws are compatible with India's WTO obligations, and India should insist on maintaining that even within the FTA. Otherwise, the access to medicines and the pharmaceutical industry in India, especially the generic sector, is definitely going to take a hit.
All right, linking trade with labor and environment issues, how difficult will this aspect of the negotiation be?
This is going to be a very difficult aspect, Parikshit, because UK hasn't signed any FTA which doesn't have a linkage with labor and environment. India's traditional position has always been that labor and environment should be outside the ambit of a trade agreement. Now, what we hear is that there might be a compromise reached in the sense that India might accept these provisions as a best endeavor clause or a best endeavor chapter, which means India will not accept these as binding commitments. Now, whether UK will accept something like that or not is something to be seen, because, as I said, so far, UK wants the other side to have binding commitments on issues like labor and environment, which India is clearly against.
Right. When it comes to mobility, Yes, India has been wanting greater mobility of professionals, greater mobility of students to the UK, higher number of visas. Will this happen automatically due to negotiations at the highest political level? Because there is a pushback and there is a demand for limits to the migration from India as well.
Yeah, I think one of the most important offensive interests that India has in all the FTA negotiations, not just with the UK but also with the EU, is trade and services, because that is a major area in which India has a comparative advantage. Now, India needs to push for liberalizing the UK labor market so that more and more professionals from India can go and work in the UK. Unless or until there is a favorable outcome on trade and services, it will be very difficult for India to kind of derive the benefits that one expects from the India-UK FTA. There is going to be resistance in the UK for this, but we do hope that there will be some give and take and some compromise would be reached on this issue.
All right, Mr. Ranjan, we've completely run out of time, but one quick question. Investment protection. The UK ambassador had also said that they won't want investment protection for UK companies investing in India. Will the Indian side be able to accept this?
Well, in my view, India should accept it. This is a reasonable demand that the UK has been making. Investment is very much a part of the FTA. You can't have a comprehensive economic trade agreement or a economic agreement without investment chapter being a part of it. But on this, India's stand is not very clear. If we look at India's FTAs with Mauritius, UAE, Australia, they do not contain any investment protection features. And India hasn't come out very clearly what its stand on this issue is. Maybe India prefers to negotiate investment treaties separately from the FTA. But in my view, this does not make economic and legal sense. And therefore, UK insisting on this is quite reasonable. In fact, it's good for India as well, because you have a lot of Indian investment in the UK, and that investment also requires protection under international law. So investment chapter would be a win-win situation.
All right.
In my view, for both the sides.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Ranjan, for joining us here on Global Eye, giving your view on the key issues that would crop up in the negotiations. And as the UK ambassador told us, the core part of negotiations on goods, services and investment protection will begin now. With that, it's a wrap. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.